You want it, you got it. This is the letters page for Legion of Superheroes number 4. This is the first letters page of this new series.
The first reactions to this radical departure.
This is the response to issue number 1 of the new Legion of Superheroes.
Closed for renovations.
Yeah, who did the lettering on that, do you think? It kind of looks like an editor or somebody did that. It doesn't look super professional, but maybe kind of.
You don't think it was GIF?
I don't know. Yeah, there's a little bit of drawing here. Hard to tell. I'm curious. The world doesn't need to know, but I'm curious.
Right.
This is the same masthead from the old days, from the Baxter Legion series. I'm not sure if they had it prior to the Baxter Legion series or not.
I can't remember that far back, man.
Yeah, I can't remember. It looks like Giffen artwork in that too, though.
Right.
It's Tom and Mary Beerbaum answering the letters, even though they're all addressed to Mark Waid.
Right. I don't know if he answers any here, but I think in some of these it seems like they're trading off. Like he answers some of them.
I don't remember that, or I don't remember one where
I think like if it doesn't have a T and M, maybe we can assume it's Mark.
Oh, yeah, okay. It starts out with the recap of the previous 3 issues and prior to that.
Way prior in some cases.
Yeah, in this issue number 4, the Mon-El has killed the Time Trapper, and they kind of tell us how he got to this point. They call back to issue number 50 of the Baxter series, where they killed the Time Trapper the first time.
Right. In Action 384, which had Eltro Gand.
Yeah, that was like 1969 or 68 or something. But they had a very succinct recap of that comic in one page here of this issue, so no need to go track down that old comic book.
But we have a video.
Right, you could watch the video too. I wonder which one will come out first. Probably the Action, huh?
Yeah.
I'm real far behind on making the videos.
It's notable, I think, that this first batch of letters is relatively positive, or at least fans seem to be reserving their judgment until they read a little more. I think that tone going to change pretty fast as we go along.
Yeah. Do you remember them publishing a lot of like negative letters in these? I mean, we'll see, I guess, as we go.
I'm sure they dig up the 2 or 3 positive ones and make sure to print those. I bet there was probably more negative than positive. They probably tried to balance it out in the letters columns.
Yeah, I'm still really curious about what the split is and how the decision makers decide what letters they're going to put in the magazine,
right.
Because they could do only the good ones and whatever, only hold back or only publish the bad ones if they've got a zinger or something that they want to say to that person. Right. Or maybe they never get bad ones because the people who hate it don't read it and don't write in, and they only get positive ones for the most part, or something like that.
Well, you see, fandom can be divided into 2 camps: fundamentalists and progressives.
Wait, we're not there yet. But yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about, isn't it?
Right.
The first letter comes from Rob Rutterham of London, England. He's an old-time fan, but he's trying to imagine what it might be like for a new reader to read this new Legion of Superheroes number 1.
There's kind of a veiled criticism of relaunching it to number 1, maybe perhaps to boost sales, which is definitely what is done in this day and age. But at least in this particular case, they had a really good reason to start.
Right. I mean, and they say their reason is what Giffen wanted to do it that way to separate this new direction from the previous one.
Right. And it's 5 years later.
Totally different tone, right?
A huge time jump, I think.
Yeah.
That's part of it too.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine a period of history where they didn't have a new number 1 for any series every couple of years.
Right, because even this series, about halfway through it, essentially becomes an entirely different series, but it kept the numbers.
Yeah, and even that for the time is kind of unusual.
Right.
Well, yeah, the Legion's always I don't know, either backwards or at the forefront or something.
Right. Now, story-wise, that when they leapt to The Baxter series, I'm not sure that really justified a new number one, but of course that was more about having the direct market version of the book, right?
Yeah, it was completely a marketing thing. And they still continued the older series too. Like that big number didn't go away for a
Right.
while.
So unsure were they about the experiment of whether it would work or not. They wanted to make sure, just in case most of their fandom wasn't going to go for that, and they were going to continue going to 7-Eleven or whatever, that they would still get their comics.
I mean, I wonder if there was writing on the wall that the 7-Eleven experience of buying comics was on the way out, and the comic book store experience of buying comics was soon to be the exclusive way. I mean, this was we're talking about the Baxter series now. This was back in 1984. I guess comic book specialty shops hadn't taken over yet.
I think that was actually the beginning of the end of the 7-Eleven era.
Is that what killed it?
Not all by itself, but it was the beginning. Because really, up until maybe even 10 years ago, I would still see like at least Mad magazines and magazines in general at gas stations, at convenience stores. Now it's rare to even see any magazines at all. But I mean, I personally think that was a huge mistake on the comic industry's part to abandon that, because someone has to be initially exposed to this stuff before they think to go to a comic shop. But that's another podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird microcosm of a lot of kind of I don't know what you'd call it, kind of a mercenary capitalism type of thing. It's like somebody's like, I have to make money, and I know that today I can make more money if I sell my expensive comic directly to an old time or a comic book fan, more money than I can make doing this returnable basis newsstand, whatever that is, the old way. But long term, yeah, that doesn't hold up.
Really, they should have, I think, realized that if nothing else, it would be like a loss leader, sending them out to non-comic book stores. It'd be worth it in the long run, because that's how they could hook new fans.
Exactly.
You blew it, guys.
Yep, they ruined it.
Archie still has double digests at like Walmart at their checkout stands.
Well, I'm really surprised too by that. Rob Rutterham, he says he had grave reservations about the 5-year gap, but he was overall pleased and impressed with the issue.
Right.
What impressed me the most was that the spirit of the Legion does not seem to have died. And it evoked all sorts of emotions about the Legion of the past and what it stood for. So he was, kind of hopeful reading this comic that everyone else, a lot of people say, oh, it's too bleak and dreary, this comic book.
Well, two ideas that are kind of echoed through a few of these letters are, one, fans being concerned that the 5-year jump is going to confuse new people. So at least one person is new and doesn't seem confused. And the other is, despite the bleakness of it, it's clear that the characters are still hopeful and optimistic. Like, in a way, it kind of makes that stand out more when it's contrasted with this more dystopian future.
It baffles me at times when I see people say, it was too bleak. I couldn't read that comic book. It was too dark. And it's as if like, well, are you reading it? Or are you just, I don't know, are you getting this idea from somebody else and regurgitating it? Or is your reading comprehension so different from mine that you don't see that there's a hopefulness and that these people are going towards a light at the end of the tunnel? You don't understand that that's part of the storytelling, a part of what they're setting up, or all you see is the cover of the comic book, and it's so dark, I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, and what is it? What exactly is it darker than? Like, we had all the way back in the 60s, Feral Lad getting killed, and Validus murdering Invisible Kid, and we had the Great Darkness Saga, which is very grim, and Superboy gets murdered.
I guess it's because back then they had spandex, and now they have trench coats and baggy shirts, I guess.
Right.
But some people got it. This guy gets it. He has a positive feeling about it, and he enjoyed it overall. And he points out that it's very appropriate to have Reap, Chameleon Boy, be the driving force behind the Reformation, just as his father was the driving
Right.
force, or he wasn't the driving force, I guess. He was the instigator. He was the money bags behind
Mhm.
the Legion originally. So now they're getting to this generational territory that
Mhm.
they should have been doing it all along. They should still be doing it, but they're not doing it that way.
Right.
But that's definitely a good angle. I think the beer bombs and Keith Giffen understand that as a driver of continuing this continuity. A lot of people, I guess, probably the same people who hate how scary and bleak and dark it is because they don't have a long underwear on, probably also are like they want it to be Superboy and Timberwolf, et cetera, forever.
I think the bleakness, yeah, it's a red herring. I mean, even after this all gets erased or rewritten, it has been dark and utopian ever since, hasn't it? The world around them.
Yeah, dystopian. Yeah.
Dystopian. I'm sorry. I say utopian, dystopian. I think that has remained.
Yeah, pretty much ever. Well, in the reboot period, it wasn't. They tried to please these other guys, I think.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
maybe at first.
Right, it did eventually veer back into this dark kind of,
Right.
and it was actually literally dark and scary
Right.
and bleak in a way. I think that I'm talking about like that Abnett and Lanning period of the rebooted Legion of Superheroes,
Right.
right around 1999, 2000.
Mhm.
That was bleak and kind of horrific in ways that even the Keith Giffen 5 years later period is not.
Right.
But it was, I think, even that was still popular.
I don't know. Have we just reached a point in history where it just doesn't seem realistic to have a future where things are better? It certainly seems that way now. Like it's very hard to imagine we're going to turn it all around.
Yeah, I mean, like in the spirit of actual science fiction, where your story set 1,000 years of the future is just a commentary on the things of today.
Right.
Yeah, it would be dark and disgusting, and hoping for the best. Fingers crossed. That's what the story
Right.
should be.
Well, even like Star Trek, that has this kind of socialist utopian like future, is full of corruption in the Federation, and there's still plenty of darkness in it, at least in the newer interpretations of it. It just makes better stories, though. I mean, the more adversarial situations for the characters to be pressed against. It doesn't work as well if they're in like a perfect future where all of our problems of today are solved.
He asks something about the United Planets, or mentions the plot line where the Legion is quote unquote been outlawed by the United Planets, and that prompts Tom and Mary's response, where they want to clear up some confusion that a number of readers have had about EarthGov, the government of Earth, and the United Planets, whether they're acting in concert,
right,
in vilifying the Legion of Superheroes. And the beer bombs want to say that those are two distinct, I guess, governmental bodies,
right,
and they are at odds with one another. They're saying that the government of the Earth, is the ones who outlawed the Legion, and the United Planets is, I guess, they haven't really talked about them yet. I don't know what's going on with the United Planets specifically. It does seem like they're in some kind of disarray generally, the United Planets.
I guess they're still up. They haven't completely collapsed, but Earth is seceded from it, Rexited.
Yeah, but they still have science police on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still confused about the science police and who they're beholden to.
Maybe it's a jurisdictional thing, or like the Earth Science Police work for EarthGov.
Like they license out the name Science Police, so every planet can have their own.
Possibly. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much previous writers thought about keeping all that stuff consistent.
I mean, I know that the beer bombs and Giffen have thought about it, but I think they still haven't explained it to me.
Right.
Because if the science police are part of the United Planets structure, and the United Planets and the government of the Earth are on the outs, why are the science police still the bad guys, or they're still like the fascist oppressor force on Earth? And they seem answerable to the Earth government.
The Earth government they're the bad guys because of the dominators.
Right, but the science police are on every planet, right?
Oh, right. But have we seen any of the science police other than the Earth Science Police?
We've seen the Rimbor Science Police in issue 2. They're trying to chase down Kono.
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't know. Is it like a third independent body of the other two?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still curious because my instinct is that Science Police and United Planets are the same. You know, it's like the law
Okay.
enforcement of the United Planets. But if the United Planets isn't on Earth anymore, why are there Science Police there? And why are
Right.
they working for the corrupt government as corrupt policemen? You know?
Unless the Earth faction is somehow like emancipated from it and realigned with,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or they still use them, and they are illegally using the name Science Police to describe their police force.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to a convenience store that used to be a 7-Eleven, and they still have the green and orange stripe, but they
Right.
don't
Right.
have, it's called 712 now or something like that. The beer bombs go on to say that to address Rob Rutterham's concern that maybe some new readers may not understand it, the beer bombs say that they haven't seen too much confusion from the new readers to date. And that leads into the next letter from a new reader, Anthony, name and address unknown. He says, "Dear Legion, the new Legion Superheroes is a title I'll definitely continue to pick up. Although I've not been a follower of the Legion, the first issue gave me a sense of what these heroes are all about. Keith Giffen is, as usual, in tip-top shape, both in writing and illustrating this issue. With this in mind, I can't wait to pick up the Great Darkness Saga, which I'm sure will be just as good and which I hope will give me an idea of the old Legion."
So he's new to the Legion, but not to Giffen.
Yeah, he's maybe kind of like me. I came to get more Keith Giffen comics.
Really?
Yeah, because I was reading Justice League.
Oh, even weirder because he didn't draw it.
But after a certain period, I realized that I think I must have got Ambush Bug somewhere along the line, and maybe like just some of that other Justice League peripheral stuff where Giffen would write it for a year or for 6 months. I think I've discovered that Giffen was the secret sauce of the stuff I liked. And then Justice League was coming to an end. I'm like, well, what else is this guy doing? And so I went over to get Legion now. And I had gotten a couple of Legion issues just, over time. I think I had this issue number 4 just in a bargain bin or like grab bag from a long time ago. Little did I know that the month that I decided to pick up Legion Superheroes for the first time was the last issue that Giffen drew, issue 39.
Wild.
But then I still stuck with it. I started with issue 39. I bought all the rest of them. I bought all the old ones. So it still worked.
I don't think until I was reading 5 years later that I realized I was kind of a fan of his and then wanted to like deliberately look for his stuff. But I already knew who he was because he did so much stuff, so many fill-ins, so many different books that I already had probably 20 Giffen comics. None of them were the same comic. Like I had a couple like Video Jacks, and I had some of those New Universe fill-ins and a Spider-Man fill-in. It was distinct enough that I always knew it was him.
Right. Did you like his artwork?
Yeah, I did.
I don't think I did. I remember there was that issue of Justice League that was like a Suicide Squad crossover that he drew.
Okay.
And I was so bummed. I didn't like it at all. Like it's kind of flat and
I can see that
so-called cartoony style.
If you were a Justice League fan and you were used to McGuire's very polished and pretty, to go from those like photorealistic faces to Giffen would be pretty jarring.
Yeah, and I think I didn't like it just in other places I'd seen his artwork, but I think I decided that, well, I like the comics that he's been responsible for in the store department well enough that I'm going to risk this artwork that I'm not too into. But it grew on me. Like I really like his artwork now, especially this 5 years later period artwork. And that Justice League issue, I don't know, I love it. I went and I bought one not too long ago, because I wanted to look at it again.
The first thing that I got of his that I noticed or like paid attention to the artwork specifically was Video Jack 1. And that had at least 12 panels, maybe more per page. So I always and he had started working that way around that time, at least more and more. He didn't start the 9-panel grid stuff with 5 years later. He might not have done it exclusively, but he was playing with it a lot in the 2 or 3 years before. And so in a way, I'm like, it's the guy with all the little panels.
Yeah, he was doing a lot of Yeah, experimenting with gridded kind of, or
Mhm. Or
gridded.
no gutters.
Yeah. Did you ever see that thing called shit, what's it called? It's one of the DC graphic novels. It's like it's this magazine size thing called Fire and Ice or Heaven and Hell or something like that. Adapted from like a Robert Bloch book.
I think so. I don't remember it by name, but I've seen like that graphic novel he did around that period.
Yeah, it has a lot of that where it's like a
Yeah,
million panels
yeah,
and like
yeah,
really like impressionistic. You have no idea what's happening in these drawings, and there's
yeah.
like ink splotches and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of swipes in that potentially, if I recall.
Probably, probably.
I haven't looked at it in a long time. I should check it out again.
I remember thinking that I probably wouldn't like his artwork as much if he was doing a standard amount of panels. But I felt like because there's so little, it kind of made it okay.
Oh, huh.
Of course, later I found his older stuff, which isn't all little panels, but it's also not as stripped down.
Yeah, like the early Legion stuff. That's much more
Right.
traditional
I think
superhero.
maybe like I'm not crazy about some of his newer stuff because it's bigger panels, but the drawing still looks like it's drawn to be in tiny panels. I mean, he does put a lot of grime and little detail on it, but the drawings seem a lot simpler, as though it was intended to be smaller.
I think he's doing a lot more of that kind of boilerplate panels that always work type of stuff
Yeah.
in his newer comics. And I mean I don't think he's had any new comics since Inferior 5, which was already like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know if he's retired or what, but I just read that Inferior 5 book a couple of days ago, and yeah, there's a lot of like these are the same panels you've been using for a long time.
Isn't he doing something new?
I don't know if he is. I haven't heard about it. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, he's you're gonna have to cut this probably, but I think he's busy, right? Aren't they like moving him to like an old folks home?
Yeah, he's been moving for a long
Yeah.
time. I don't know where he's going to. Maybe he got divorced. Maybe his wife kicked him out.
Yeah. I have no idea.
I from his posts, it made it seem like he was just moving across the country or moving
Right.
to Florida or something.
Moving in with one of his kids. I
Yeah.
don't know. Is his podcast just going to end? I mean, presumably wherever he's going, his son-in-law is going to be there. Seems kind of weird to start a podcast with a guy you're about to move away from, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So maybe his son-in-law is there helping him do a podcast, helping him pack, and then all of them are going to move somewhere together.
And they're going to live in their
Maybe
basement.
so. Maybe it is. It's like one of these multi-generational households, and the grandparents are all gonna. There's a lot of those in my neighborhood. I think in
Yeah.
general, I think that's the way America is kind of happening now. It's like just to save money, everybody's all moving in together. I don't know how they do it, but they're doing that.
Well, honestly, that's probably a better way to live. That's how most of the world, because of our with our prosperity here, we sprawled out and we all have our own homes, and we send our old people to storage facilities when they can't take care of themselves anymore. But
No, I mean, in a way, it might be good for a family structure to be that way again.
right,
But it's also like it's the reason it's happening, like you said, is because like there's this fucking second Dust Bowl about to happen or something.
right, right.
You know, it's like Keith Giffen and his family is doing this grapes or ass shit.
Jesus.
Like his good for
Yeah.
nothing son in law is going to go live in the river with some other guys and they have to leave him behind.
Yep. Good times ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't wait.
This guy Anthony says he's eager to pick up the Great Darkness Saga to learn about the old Legion. Great Darkness Saga is one of those weird things where it's like that is not a good starting point. That's like when you like, hey, what's a good comic book? And they're like, Crisis on Infinite Earths. You know, it's like I'm a new person and you're gonna give me Crisis or Watchmen or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a good starting point. That's not going to get me hooked on comics. That's going to confuse me about comics.
Right.
And I think the Great Darkness Saga is kind of the same way. It's like this 5-part thing. You got to know who the Legion of Superheroes is. You got to know who the new gods are. You got to know what Daxamites are or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. How about you just give me a one and done comic book? That's where to start to get a flavor of the old Legion of Superheroes, you know?
You mean like this?
Maybe. It might be better, yeah.
Well, at least it does have that one and done quality.
Right. That annual number 2 it's shallow and dumb, but it does tell you the concept, and it shows you a wide variety of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody's going to fall in love with reading Legion comics with that one, but who knows? Like if you start with the new Legion of Superheroes 5 years later, #1, and like it, yeah, check out that other one. That'll give you an idea. It shouldn't be your first one, but it could be a good one to get you started on the broader spectrum.
Right. Yeah, I think 5 years later is a lot like a modern TV series. If you're watching some 10-parter on Netflix, people they get through the first one, they don't know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, what the hell is going on. They don't just give up. They're watching because they want to figure out who these people are and have the mystery solved.
But yeah, you're right. But to hear some of these people tell it, it's like they watched that first episode of the Netflix show, but they're so confused. They have no idea. And they're like, I don't know if I can keep watching this. Oh, how do I know what's going on? How do I watch a second episode when I know so little about what happened in the first episode?
Right.
Like, you sound so stupid.
Pretty much all of these people who are saying that are people who do know the score. They're completely familiar with all the characters. So they don't really have any reason to complain about it.
They just hate change.
Yeah. Reactionaries.
Word of the day.
Should display it across the
if we say it again, scream real loud.
Right.
This next one, this Elizabeth Holden letter.
She opens up saying more or less what I was saying a few minutes ago about how it was easier to buy a utopian future, perhaps in the 50s and 60s than it is today.
She says, we're in the hard-nosed 80s. But 1,000 years in the future without even time travel or wealth as ways to escape.
Well,
I guess that refers to Chameleon Boy. Even in spite of his wealth, he can't get out of this problem. I guess, yeah, this is Elizabeth Holden from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I guess what she's saying is that the time has come now for these Legion comics to reflect today.
Right.
In the science fiction tales that they're telling about 1,000 years in the future.
She still manages to close it somewhat optimistically, saying, once again, the Legion is possibly the beacon, the bright light in the darkness, the optimism.
Maybe they'll give hope back to their society.
Right.
It's interesting that she's saying that the 1989 society is almost a bleak dystopia that's reflected in this comic book. It's only gotten worse since then.
Yeah, what did you have to worry about, Elizabeth? The little hole in the ozone layer from Hairspray and George Bush Sr.?
Well, and she's even in Canada.
Oh.
The Haven, the utopia up there in Canada, north of the border.
I think I just heard a month ago on NPR, like maybe we've repaired the damage to the ozone layer from what is it? The emissions, the
CFCs.
Right. But it was just like a little blip, like it was a little blurb. It was like, so at least we fixed that. It's no big deal. I was like, this is going to be a triumphant moment, but I guess overall climate change is so terrible. That's completely insignificant compared to the rest.
I think that is pretty irrelevant compared to the other stuff.
But that was when I first remember them talking about Earth Day and recycling and all that stuff. That was the focus, the hole in the ozone layer. Like if we can just get that ozone layer closed, we'll be okay.
And that seems like a good way to kind of rally people around. It's like, no, pretty soon the atmosphere is going to have this hole in it where, I don't know, like they put it that way, like you can make kids think that like, oh, outer space is going to come through there or something.
Right.
Instead of be like, no, it's like sunlight isn't going to get filtered and it'll burn you to death or something,
Well, it's going to melt the ice caps, right?
Yeah. They're melting anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Just from the greenhouse effect, I guess, is what that is.
Oh, yeah. It kind of pivoted to that. Well, they had to start us in on the bad news easy, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people have known about this bad.
I know. I like how we've just sort of gradually transitioning from we still have time, or like it's not happening, to oh well, it's too late. Smoke them if you got them. Might as well enjoy shit.
I know, it's so messed up.
Let it burn. It's too late to do anything about it.
And the people saying that are the people who are in their 70s. Like the people with the power to do that are in their 70s, and like, yeah, literally, it's too late for you to notice any change.
It's the boomer. It's the boomers on. They're like, see, I wouldn't want to be
Yeah. Yeah, it's really strange, that mentality that like once I'm gone, nothing else matters anymore, you
Right.
know? Like, but yeah, but you have kids, right? Or you have
Well,
kids and grandkids,
obvious,
Nancy
obvious,
Pelosi or whoever,
exactly,
you know?
exactly. I mean, obviously, it's immoral for anybody to think that way, but you would think particularly people who have children who are going to live through
Yeah.
this. I think they have a little skin in the game.
That was Elizabeth Holden.
I see a mention of Mort Weisinger here.
In the Elizabeth Holden letter?
Oh no, the very next one.
Oh, and the Rex Joyner letter. Long time letter writer Rex Joyner, Big Rapids, Michigan. That's a great name for town, Big Rapids.
Yes, yes.
His letter, he's talking about the two groups of what comics fans, the fundamentalists and the progressives.
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamentalists are people who have a firm idea of what a given book should be like, and if things change, so the book isn't like that anymore, then they become angry and drop the book. And the progressives tend to have a more fluid idea as what each given book can be like, and look on new developments with fair, if critical, eye. So they'll give you the benefit of the doubt if you change the direction of a comic book.
I mean, I don't know how accurate an assessment that really is, because I think we've learned that the fundamentalists will keep reading just so they can complain or tweet, or
Yeah.
to some extent they enjoy getting pissed off about it. It gives them something to complain about.
Yeah, he doesn't factor in hate reading, but it's kind of true. But yeah, like these kind of binary looks at things
Right.
don't always really hold water, right? Because it's a spectrum, it's a smear of interpretations. I do see a lot of these fundamentalist types. They're still out there now, talking about these comics, like when we mentioned them on Facebook. I hate that YouTube comments. These comics made me stop buying the Legion or whatever. It's like, okay, you didn't really give it a chance, probably, or I don't know what.
Yeah, they love the police, and
yeah, the police is there to protect them and their property. The science police. What does he say about Mort Weisinger? In the days of Mort Weisinger, the Legion was youthful, exuberant, optimistic in outlook, and featured plenty of friendly camaraderie. Over the years, these features have been chipped away. But he says that he's not negative about it when he's saying that. Like, that's a natural progress, I think, is what he's trying to say. Yeah, he says the Legion fundamentalists have seen that and cried foul, accusing the creators of betraying the very essence of the Legion. And the progressives, on the other hand, have evaluated each change on its own merits, applauding the fact that the book was growing up.
I'm noticing like this kind of theme with all of these, like where the bulk of the letter sounds critical, but then they cap it with something really complimentary.
Uh-huh.
Like they're kind of being passive aggressive while saying good job. So I kind of feel like this letter is very similar to some of the others, where he once again points out that it is a darker future, but he thinks the Legion in ways gets back to its more optimistic roots in this case, because they will stand out as optimistic in the dark world, the negative world.
Yeah, he's trying to address the fan reaction in like the first 2/3 of this letter.
Oh, right. And I think maybe he's saying like what the fundamentalists aren't catching on to is they're getting the Legion they want, and maybe more so now, because their optimistic roots will shine.
Yeah, I think he's right. Like, you're going to be able to see the like all this stuff you've taken for granted up to now. You'll be able to shine a spotlight on that, on those good traits.
I think that's also that's how Superman is kind of written these days quite often. Like he's
just a beacon of goodness in a dark world.
Right. Like they're trying to make the Boy Scout thing not a liability, but an asset. It's like everyone else is grim and gritty and dark, and he's the good guy.
And I suppose that's a good tactic, right? Like,
yeah, sure. I'm not saying all of it is, but a lot of it that I've read is like that. I feel like that even kind of starts all the way back in like Kingdom Come, and like those Snyder movies kind of have that going on, though he does break someone's neck. He had no choice. There's nothing else that would work.
Superman, you can't do anything else but break this guy's neck to kill him.
couldn't like blow those people out of the way with my super breath or use my super speed or anything else. The only option is to
Well, you could have incinerated him with your heat vision. You just had to
Right.
break that guy's neck. He Rex Joyner goes on and he's like, he's talking about how they may become a force for hope and optimism, but at this point right now, it's all just potential. He says the first issue is great. Can you keep it up for the next 30 years? I don't know. That's a funny question. They cannot. They didn't pull it off. Here we are 30 years later. They're gone. They got canceled a long time ago.
Oh, right. It is 30 years later.
Yep.
It's kind of sad to me. Like we're coming up on pretty soon, like the post 0 hour period will have been longer than the pre-0 hour period.
Oh, wow. I hadn't really thought about it like that. Wait, really? Like,
because they were around 35 years.
Yeah, like 1960, let's say, until 1994. Yeah, 35 years. Is it 35 years ago that since 1994?
We're getting close.
Fuck.
Okay, we're a year away from that, aren't we?
I don't know how to add 94 plus 35. That's 100. It's like 130. So yeah, we're about 7 years away.
Yeah, you're right.
I guess. But yeah, like not much to celebrate on the Legion's 65th birthday. Is that what it is this year? 1958 to 23 would be 58 to 08 would be 50. 08 to 18 would be 60. 18, yeah, 65. The 65th anniversary this year. No Legion comic was released.
We're due for a reboot, aren't we? Been like 2 years.
They just had a failed reboot 2 years ago.
Yeah, you got to do another one, and this one will be the real DC future. Those other ones weren't real. They're like the future of Earth Prime or some other.
It could be any future. I don't give a fuck as long as Wildfire's there and Princess Projectra.
No, it's got to be our future. It doesn't count.
Tom and Mary say, we tend to think your analysis only applies to extreme fundamentalists. Since most of the Old Guard Legion readers we know are fairly pleased or at least open-minded about the new series so far, all of which proves how difficult it is to lump readers into such broad categories.
Only the extreme fundamentalists.
Yeah, just being a fundamentalist isn't extreme.
Right.
There's more extreme.
Like the MAGA Republicans.
Right.
That Biden's always talking about.
Yeah, like there's good Republicans and then there's the MAGA ones.
Right. The ones that want to starve you but don't use the N-word. Other than that, they're good guys.
They're just like us. They're just like the rest of us.
Right.
Mark Lucas, Los Angeles, California. Oh, they put his home address here too. I'll have to go check this guy's house.
Doxed him.
It's an apartment, or he has a house number or apartment number 2. He says, my principal complaint about issue number 1 was that you jumped too quickly into the reformation of the Legion. I wish you'd taken more time for us to become accustomed to the idea of the Legion's breakup and the chaos that ensued. And the response from the Beer Bombs, they say the vast majority of comments suggested readers want to learn more and see more characters more quickly.
Right. And that ends up becoming like a major criticism of the 5 years later period because people, 12 issues in when they finally form the team.
But yeah, you're right. It takes a year or something before.
Well, we kind of never get there entirely. Like,
yeah, that's true. But they do have, like, you open up the cover of issue 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever, and instead of saying 5 years later, it's the space page and it says the Legion of Superheroes, like it's a big event. And it was kind of cool to see that. For
sure. I mean, that's the closest we get. But I think people are like, when are they going to get their costumes back? When's it all going to be? And we never really, not that I was dying to see them get back in their costumes, but we never really, the whole gang never really gets back together. And maybe that makes more sense. Like, why would all of them be on board? We get to see, like, we see Starboy a few times, but he never like rejoins the team.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like if you read issue number 1 and you think that somehow they're going to get you back to a point where it looks like the one of the Greg LaRocque issues of the Baxter series, like somehow we're going to go from the events of Legion of Superheroes #1 to that again. Like,
right.
they're not doing that. What are you thinking
Right.
about? You know what I mean? Like, that's you're not going to get a scene where Ultra Boy dramatically pulls the boots on with the silly fringe and pulls the like.
We did kind of get that though, because then there was that issue where they put their T-shirts back on.
Out of storage, and they probably get burned up again or something. But no, like I'm talking full spandex regalia, bright primary colors, and then they all high five each other in front of the Legion flag.
Right. There kind of is no going back to that, because Giffen was trying to solve the problem that it was getting harder and harder to pull off calling them kids and with these code names, because they were already clearly adults and had been for a long time. And it's kind of silly that they have those names and maybe even be wearing those tights at the age that they are.
Well, to me, the sillier thing is that there are fans who are like, okay, we've had one issue of this. When are you getting back to the Greg LaRocque style?
Right.
Like, well, you're only going to let me do this one issue? Mm-hmm. Like, you think that this is only going to last one issue or two or whatever? Right. Like, come on, you extreme fundamentalists.
Right.
This is not a gag. This is really happening.
I think if they ever kind of became superheroes again, it would probably be closer to what Giffen made them look like towards the end of the Baxter event. Those costumes are more like uniforms.
Yeah. Well, and that's totally what superhero comics even became eventually within 5 or 6 years, like those Wildstorm things and stuff. Like, they still wore spandex, but they were uniform and they had wrinkles and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, and like the X-Men movies, like those first ones, like, it all turned into that. That's what people eventually wanted. Like, they hated it when Giffen did it and thought it was stupid and ugly. And maybe those costumes were kind of ugly, but like, that's what they became. There wasn't like each hero had his own different style. It was all like they were all in a uniform.
Right.
And that's what the readers, I guess, wanted, or they just fell on board with it. And so I think it was just in the water, but that stuff happened after Giffen was doing it in his return period at the Baxter series, when it hadn't really happened yet.
I think that, and that's still happening, because I mean, I'm fine with superhero costumes. I mean, I accept that it's just part of reading comics, but some people really are bothered by like the guys having underwear on the outside of their tights or something.
Yeah.
So there's been this move where none of them have underwear anymore, and their pants are baggier now. And I don't know what that is about exactly. I don't necessarily like it, but I like it in this context. This is totally different.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of things. Like, back in 1989, the extreme fundamentalist fan doesn't want that big of a change where they go from each having a distinct garish underoos costume to everybody wearing the same suit. But now I think living in a world ruled by fascism and authoritarianism, I think people are beginning to love that, and they like seeing X-Men wearing gray costumes that all look the same.
That's a good take. Oh, I didn't think you were going to go there. The fascism angle, yeah.
But right, it's like people, the extreme fundamentalists, that's what they like now,
Right.
And like, it used to be that they were like, Batman doesn't carry a gun. And then today's extreme fundamentalist comic fan, like, how come Batman doesn't have more guns? He should have a gun in every fucking boot he wears.
I think it's really just the tail wagging the dog. Like, the cinematic universes are the main thing now, and the comic is an appendage to it. And nobody wears masks in movies because you can't show the star's face. So now lots and lots of superheroes have ditched their masks in the comic to make it consistent with the films. And in the films, they're not wearing tights. They're wearing...
like military fatigues.
Right.
I think partly also is that it is strictly a boys club now, an adult boys club, and they're guys who have no style. I have no style, so I'm speaking of the choir here, but it's like boys stuff. You're not interested in costumes. That's like playing with dolls or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just like all the guys I ever see, like they are wearing like all black because that's the easiest thing to make you look okay and not have to think about it because you don't know anything about it. What looks good, and you're embarrassed by brightness or something like that.
Right. Unless you have a white cat.
Yeah. You just have to use the sticky thing all the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you feel like that could be an aspect of it? Is like our audience thinks bright colors are whatever, Our audience doesn't like neat costumes because they're just adult guys who wear jeans and t-shirts.
I don't know if it's their fashion in particular. I think it is what works for a small child and is great for a small child who a lot of this stuff was initially designed for. Now that they are the only ones reading it as adults, the comics are feeling like they need to remain plausible to an adult, and an adult will think it's silly that someone's running around in tights, whereas a kid won't think twice about it. Yeah. So this isn't realistic enough.
It's so strange. I think we're kind of speculating on what the real beliefs of the extreme fundamentalist is, and it's totally different from 1989 to today. Like it's totally the reverse.
Right.
Even though they're both awful. It's both awful roads to be on. It's like the same reactionary word of the day.
Ding, 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 ding.
Belief system. I want to be a Legion progressive, a far left wing Legion progressive.
Yeah,
who hates the science police.
Yeah, defund the science police. Nationalize everything else.
Bits of
Legionnaire business.
Yeah, but I was looking at
those are the little short bits.
Yeah, but just above it is the box for next issue. It's kind of in the wrong place.
You're such a fundamentalist. Who says the box has to be on the bottom?
I don't know. That's
fundamentalist thinking. Be progressive.
All right, I'm sorry. It just seems like that's something that comes at the end. I was surprised it's there. I overlooked it, and then I was going to go back and read it. They say don't miss issue number 5 for one of the most radically different Legion stories ever. And it is. We'll read it. It's a pretty good one. I think the pair, issue 4 and 5, probably the best ones.
I actually did not pick up 5. I had to go back and get it a few months later. Because I looked at it at the comic shop, and that's when I thought they went off the rails.
Did you say this is too bleak, too dark?
No, it was like too Renaissance Festival.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. Because I've always been more of the sci-fi guy than the fantasy guy. And it seemed like it was turning into a fantasy book. Maybe this is too much for me.
I guess we'll have to talk about it when we get there, but I wonder if you thought that this was the permanent direction, was for it to look like Renaissance Festival.
I think I did.
Okay, now bits of Legionnaire business. People are just kind of quibbling with some of the deep cut stuff that happened in there, and some mistakes the beer bombs and Giffen made in the writing. I don't really care about them.
I've seen a couple people bring this up, the Lightning Lad thing. I think Tom Beerbaum mentioned it in his "It's Okay, I'm a Senator," that the fans mistook the flashback kind of overview of Legion history. They thought they had changed the way Lightning Lad had died or had made a mistake. They show him floating dead in space, right?
I only vaguely remember this recap thing.
It was like on the second page when you're watching TV and they're showing clips from the Legion's history.
Oh, and so it's part of the documentary. It's the commercial for the Legion documentary.
Right, yes.
It's like the narrator doesn't say he died and came back to life. They just say he died.
Right.
And is that what people are taking an issue with?
I think so. If I remember right, that's it. It's like a hair splitting thing. Like it doesn't matter. And even if it was inaccurate, it still works because it's a dumb TV documentary that might be lying and exaggerating or just have the facts wrong.
Well, yeah, and we know he didn't die, right? I mean,
right.
I guess in issue 1, but
like he died sometime during the 5-year loop,
Oh, maybe that's what they thought.
I guess.
But yeah, it's just it is just people quibbling. It's like you said he died permanently. I caught you. You made a mistake.
Well, actually,
Yeah, that's lame. Kenneth Aramd of Baltimore wants to know why issue 1 had no page numbers. I think you had a problem with that too, right? You said you wrote down the page numbers on it with the pencil on
yeah,
every issue.
yeah, and an old copy.
Yeah, and there's more splitting hairs. There was actually 2 men who tried to kill R.J. Brand, but you guys in your recap only showed 1. Don't care. Who cares?
I thought it was the other way around.
I don't think it matters either way. Somebody tried to kill him, you know? It's like a 1-panel recap. It doesn't matter.
I think Giffen added a guy to make it more dramatic.
It says Keith chose to modify the assassination story to imply that history had exaggerated the drama by creating a second assassin. He took an assassin away.
Oh, he took one away. Okay, yeah.
But see, I would have read that and been like, if I had known that there's only 2, I would have said, oh, this panel probably didn't have room for 2 assassins. I get the gist, right?
Right. I kind of like that Giffen. I know it must drive the fans crazy, but he's a little fast and loose with the details. And why not? It's science fiction. It's after crisis. Maybe little tiny things changed here and there. Like Shirley knew Mon-El was not naked in that El Trogan switch scene. Maybe he thought it made more sense because the dude took his costume.
Yeah, we'll have to find out next issue in the bits if somebody complains about the nude Mon-El out there in the asteroid belt. Mark Billion of Malvern, PA wants to know why issue 1 was so late. The Tom and Mirbaum say it wasn't because of any creative issues. It was a printing problem. We've talked about that in the issue number 1 video we made, I think. Printing problem. I wonder if any of the misprinted ones survived. Wouldn't that be a big collectible to have? With the gold blob cover instead of the ring.
Maybe the guy who has like 90% of the Giffen original art has a copy.
I hope someday that they unearth a trove of the misprinted Legion number 1s. I want one.
Maybe they'll unearth them someday like they did all those, what was it, like the E.T. video game?
I knew you were going to say that, yeah. The E.T. Atari game. Yeah. Lee Klaus and Dave Dykema of Toledo, Ohio. They want them to lose the new from the new Legion of Superheroes and to get rid of flight rings. Tom and Mary say, you want it, you got it. So I guess there's no more flight rings. Even though I don't know why you would get rid of flight rings. That seems like a pretty cool little thing. Like if you were an old-time Legionnaire, you would still have your flight ring.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I seem to remember. I think it was some like mental gymnastics I was making. Like maybe they were kind of like cell phones need a network. Like maybe there's some sort of electromagnetic force they tapped into to work. Like maybe they would not work without it. But I'm sure they've gone in time and used them.
I mean, they're supposed to be made of the anti-gravity element that Mon-El created that time.
Oh, right. That's right.
So I guess if there's no more Mon-El, I don't know who's going to have created that anti-gravity element. Just Brainiac 5, I guess.
Oh, shit. Maybe they don't even exist.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Post 5 years later. Didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I do know like Giffen was eager to get rid of them.
Weird. Why?
I don't know, but I think maybe even in that podcast, maybe he said something like, you're talking about stuff he wanted to get rid of, like no more costumes, code names, flight rings. I don't know. I can see it both ways. Like it's kind of more interesting if like Mon-El has to take a chunk of Earth to carry the other guys, or we've got to figure out other means. Brainiac 5 has to pilot a small shuttle with a few of them in it. Or...
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready to roll with it, but it seems like it's kind of pretty useful and cool. And if they already have them, like, why would they wouldn't stop working? I don't think.
Right.
A bunch of people want to see the return of Ron de Vidar as the Green Lantern of the 30th century, and they say you're not going to. They have big plans for him, but it's not as a Green Lantern, I guess.
Did Giffen want to kill him, and they begged him not to kill him?
Yeah, and they make kind of a big character out of him. Well, no, kind of a secondary character, maybe bigger than he used to be.
I personally think he plays a better role not as a Green Lantern. I know a lot of people are really attached to him being a Green Lantern, but he was only a Green Lantern in that one issue. It was a gimmick. But I think it's burned into people's memories because of the Who's Who entry of him dressed that way.
They're like, oh, you finally did something with him, turned him into a superhero, and we want everybody we like to be
Right.
superheroes and main characters.
But I think he works way better as, the guy that Laurel ends up marrying because Brainiac 5 is too, preoccupied with his work or whatever. And they mention in there, he's like Brainiac 5's best friend.
Yeah.
So his best friend married his girl.
Damn, that's cold. We're done with the letters. We got to the end. That was the letters page for Legion of Superheroes. Number 4, talking about Legion of Superheroes number 1, the brand new dawn of the next chapter of the Legion of Superheroes comic book.
Long live the Legion.
See you in 30 days.
Super